Then if we are ready, I will call the meeting to order at this time at 6:30. Good evening, Exeter. Good evening to the Select Board, respective town staff, attendees, and everybody watching from home. As chair of the Exeter Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Public notice of this meeting was posted on the town website and on the bulletin board of the town offices at 10 Front Street. As provided in that public notice, the public may access the meeting online and via phone, but we remind the public that the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. Let's start this meeting by taking a roll call attendance. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. When each member of the board is introduced, if you would please state your presence and also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting and who that person is, which is required under the Right to Know law. Vice Chairwoman Molly Cowan.
Hi, everybody. I'm here alone.
Thank you. Good evening. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
I am here currently alone in the room, but I have no guarantees that people don't pop in.
Thank you. Good evening. Selectman Brown.
I am present and alone.
Thank you. Good evening. And Selectwoman Julie Gilman.
Good evening. I am in my office. I am alone.
Good evening. Thank you. And we have our town manager with us as well, Rustine.
Good evening. I'm in the office and by myself as well.
Okay. We're going to jump into our board interviews. We have 5 board interviews this evening, all for the Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee. And after these 5 interviews, I believe we only have 1 or 2 left for our next meeting. And then we can start deliberating on appointments. Excuse me. To the 5 applicants, once you're done with your interview, if you could switch over to the attendees panel, we'd love to have you stay on and watch the meeting. But once you've done with your interview, you can hop over to the attendees. If you need help, any of the staff, Bob or Dan, can give you a hand with that. First up this evening, we have the Dr. Reverend Emily Heath. And looking to see if she's here. We can jump to the next. All right, I don't see Reverend Heath, so we will jump then to our next interviewee. We have Ann Griffin, and I know I saw you earlier. Ann, good evening.
Can you hear me?
I can see you and hear you. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your application. We're conducting our interviews ongoing. And as we've done with all the other applicants, if you could just take a minute or two and tell us a little bit about yourself, your interest in serving on this committee, and then we'll ask you a couple of questions and take it from there.
Sure, thank you. I've been a resident of Exeter for 13 years. I have 3 children. 1 would be in Lincoln Street, 1 would be in Main Street, and 1 just turned 3. But I say would be because we are entering the new journey of homeschooling for the first time this year. So that's an adventure. But more about me. Before I was a stay-at-home mom, I was a special ed teacher, so I have a degree in special education. I'm active in a church. I am active in this town. I'm out and about all the time. Always at the playgrounds mostly. But I'm interested because I'm invested in this town because of my children, because of my husband and I also have in-laws in this town. So how our police department is doing benefits my family. So that's why I'm interested.
Great. Well, thank you for your interest. As we've been doing with the other applicants, the 2 select board representatives to this committee have been asking the first questions. So we'll keep with that practice. Selectman Brown?
Hi, and thanks for volunteering or applying. My question is about economic diversity in the town and how you think that presents unique challenges or opportunities for the police department.
That's a great question. I feel like my family and I are kind of in the middle. But I do feel like the way that our police department, that I can see from my perspective, works with the economic differences, diversity in our town is all the different opportunities and events and projects that I see the officers doing. Like I've seen bike clinics, officers at the library, officers in the schools, Coffee with a Cop. All of the programs like that, I feel like are open to the entire community. So I don't really see an area where they're shut off from, or they're not available. And I think the best way for them to meet the needs of everyone in this town is just to be available and to present more opportunities to be available in a positive. I can get into this later, but when I look at from my background, I see it as a good thing for officers to be known prior to being called upon for help. And these different, the open houses, the night out, National Night Out, the car seat installations, all of those I feel like are events that get our officers known prior to being called upon for help. And I feel like that is a good way of breaking down any type of boundaries or walls of diversity.
Thank you. Thanks.
Selectwoman Cowan.
And thanks for throwing your hat in the ring here. We always appreciate, especially when families with young children get involved in the town government. So my question is the same that I've asked everybody. Where do you see the Exeter Police Department? What are the areas that you see that are going well? And what are the areas that you see that could be improved upon?
Where would you like me to start? Well, why don't I start with where things are going well? It kind of goes back to what I just said. I really believe that they do well in being out in the community. I've seen them at schools. On the first day of school, I've seen them present at the Halloween parade, the costume parade. I know my kids have been at the bike clinic where they've been. I think my in-laws have been to Coffee with a Cop. They're very visible in our town and in a positive light. And I really think they do a good job of being out and available. When it comes to what they could do better, I was looking on the website and I looked at the department review, and based on my background, I really have an interest in how law enforcement is trained with people with special needs and mental health. And I saw on the website that there is I'm looking at my notes. The Alzheimer's and Individuals with Special Needs Assistance Initiative. And that seems to be like an IDing program. And then Help Me Home project. And those both sound great. But I think more could be done in training our officers to assist people with special needs and mental health issues within our community. I think those trainings would greatly benefit our officers, but also benefit the residents of Exeter.
Thank you for your answer.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olive.
All questions that I might have had were answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman.
I just want to say thank you for volunteering, and any questions I had have been answered too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anne, for your interest and for taking the time to come out tonight for the interview. And as I said, we'll be interviewing 2 more people next week, and then we'll start deliberating on appointments. So thank you again for your interest.
Thank you for this opportunity. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we'll go back to the Dr. Reverend Emily Heath. Good evening.
Good evening. How are y'all?
Well, how are you?
Doing well, thank you. I apologize. I had a little bit of a tech issue.
That's okay. It's happened to all of us.
All right.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Again, if you could take just a couple of minutes to tell us a little about yourself and your interest in the commission, and we'll ask a few questions and I'll turn it over to you.
Certainly. I have lived here in Exeter for 6 years. I moved here to become the pastor of the Congregational Church, which is the white church with red doors downtown. My wife and I have lived here in Exeter for 6 years now, as I said. My background is both as a trauma chaplain and a hospital chaplain. So I've spent a lot of time in my early ministry working in emergency departments and working with first responders. My academic background, I've done doctoral coursework in psychology and organizational theory. I also have a strong background in working with folks with addiction and do work every day with folks who are, dealing with mental health concerns and trying to help folks to get the right help that they need. So I come with that background from the ministry side. Of course, as a pastor, you're engaged with the entire community. But I'm applying here not out of that faith background, but out of that other background. I have been serving for the past 3 years as the chaplain to the Exeter Police Department, which means that as civilians go, I've probably done about as many ride-alongs as anyone has at this point, and have gotten to know the officers and have gotten to know the leadership of the department well. And at the same time, I believe that I'm someone who can speak very honestly about what's going on in the department and has had a firsthand look. And I think Chief Pullen will tell you that if I see something that doesn't look, that could be better, I'm the first to kind of come and talk to him about it. And I have a good rapport with the department while still being a civilian who is not a part of the department. I am passionate about diversity efforts. I've been involved in diversity, equity, inclusion work since 1994. As an LGBTQ person, when I came out in the 90s, I had very negative experiences at the hands of police officers who often hassled people in the LGBTQ community down south where I'm from. And, it took me a lot of time to come around to trusting law enforcement officers. And I certainly understand, now why a lot of people are still struggling with that. I'm a supporter of Black Lives Matter, and I'm someone who has a good relationship with a police department and believes that there are ways that improvement needs to happen in the law enforcement community. I don't believe there can be trust until that's acknowledged. So we may live in a small town, but that doesn't mean that some of these same concerns aren't in play. And what we all bring from our interactions with police and other communities comes here. And so these things have to be talked about and these things have to be worked on to make sure that this community is the best that it can be in terms of our law enforcement.
Great, thank you. Selectman Brown, we'll start with you.
Thanks. Thank you for applying and for all your work with the department so far. Just a general question, same as everyone else, about economic diversity in the town. How do you you have a unique perspective on that, having done so many ride-alongs, but basically unique challenges and features of our policing based on the economic diversity in the town.
Mm-hmm. I think people, when they hear Exeter, have a certain view that everyone here is middle class to upper middle class, and the reality is riding along. We have folks that are in very dire places economically. When I've been in the police car and we've gone into places where folks are struggling, I've seen real sensitivity to that. I think it's even telling that our officers can't afford to live here in town. I think that's something that we should be taking under account is what does it mean that we're a community where a lot of people, including our public servants, are priced out, and does that impact in any way the quality of recruits we're getting. I think we have very, very good recruits, but is that going to, down the line, be something that's hard for us? And then in town, just making sure that everyone is treated equally, that the person that lives in a large house is treated as well as the person who's struggling, and that unhoused populations are treated with respect as well.
Those are amazing points. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi there. Thank you for applying. We're so, I'm glad to have your application here. And I've asked the same question as well. Where do you see the police doing well? And where is there room for improvement?
Mm-hmm. Overall, I think we have a very good department. I think that under recent leadership, it's gotten better. I think that they do well in community engagement. They try to eliminate stands. They try and go and greet kids as they're going into school. They try and go and do the right thing. However, community policing, it is always a goal that the department has to keep meeting. And they're not there yet because they haven't had enough time under an administration that values community policing. So that's something that's going to have to be worked on. I think establishing trust with the community is going to be a huge part of moving forward. I'm in a profession where people look at me when I'm wearing a clergy collar and make certain assumptions and project negative images onto it. Even if we have the most wonderful police officers in the world who never do anything wrong, people are still bringing those assumptions. And so what those of us who are in those professions have to do is do better and establish trust. Whether, we can say, well, I didn't do this, but it doesn't matter. We have to establish and work to be professionals that people can trust and rely upon. And so I think going forward, that's going to be the continued work of any police department, but especially here in Exeter, I think that's going to be something that they're really going to have to keep doing. I think the officers are committed to that and to that transparency, but that's going to have to be a continuing struggle.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Selectwoman Gilman.
Same for me. Thank you, Emily, for volunteering, and you've answered the questions that I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Reverend Heath, thank you for your application and your interest in serving. Thank you for your time tonight, and thank you for what you do for your community.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alexis Simpson.
Hi.
Hi, Alexis. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thank you for your interest in your application. If you could take just a few minutes and tell us a little bit about your interest in the committee, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Great. Definitely. Hi, everyone. As Nico said, my name is Alexis Simpson. I live at 20 Main Street in Exeter. I used to be a state representative from Exeter, so I've had the opportunity to come into contact with a lot of the people who live in Exeter. And periodically questions come up about policing, as you can imagine, especially recently. So because these conversations around criminal justice reform are coming up more and more for me, I took advantage last year of being able to take a class at the Kennedy School of Government in criminal justice reform, focused specifically on issues of racial justice. So what I'm hoping is that I can serve on the committee with other volunteers from Exeter and the select board and members of the police department. I'm hoping that given my experience and then my professional experience as a pastor as well, that I can help increase communication between community members and the police department as a member of the committee. I was reading that one of Chief Pullen's goals for this committee is to develop, strengthen, and sustain relationships in the community. And I think that increasing relationships between community members and the department will both satisfy the community's desire to be more involved in discussions about what policing is appropriate and effective. And it will also allow the community to support the police department in the ways that it needs to grow too. So that's why I'm here applying for this.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Selectman Brown.
Thank you so much for applying. Same question as I've asked, economic diversity. How would you speak to that in terms of the town and the department's approach?
Sure. I appreciate your question, and I'd noticed you'd been asking it of everyone, so I was trying to give it some thought, both from a more academic perspective, but then also from an Exeter perspective. Because in Exeter, since I've run for office a number of times, so I've had the opportunity to speak with residents all across the town of Exeter at their front doors, and I have a really good sense of the economic diversity of Exeter, but I haven't seen data from any of the policing that goes on in Exeter that would show how the economic circumstances impact police interactions. So I know that we have data from across the country generally, and it shows that men specifically with incomes below $20,000 a year have increased interactions with police that involve the use of force. And this, as we know, is more true of Black men and men of color. It might be that the Exeter Police Stakeholders Committee should engage residents in these conversations and in data analysis and gathering. So I do believe that the committee should do everything that it can to engage residents across the economic spectrum in its work. And hopefully that part of it could be to look at what the data is related to police presence and work in the different neighborhoods across the town of Exeter. The opportunity and the challenge is probably in understanding what happens now and how to move forward in that work. Exeter is very different from Atlanta, which is where I lived a couple of decades ago. But when I lived in Atlanta, I did some work advocating for individuals experiencing chronic homelessness when the city council was embarking on some efforts to criminalize homelessness. So I'm very sensitive to those issues of homelessness and of interactions with police as well. So I would bring that to the committee also.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Hey, Alexis, thank you for submitting your application. And my question is the same question that I've asked all applicants, which is what do you see going right with the police department, and where are areas of improvement?
Yes, thank you for that. I have a similar answer for what is going right, I think, as other folks on the call. So I won't go on and on about that, but I really have appreciated the focus on community policing over the past couple of years. I've really noticed a difference in both my own daily life in Exeter, but also in conversations that I have with others. So I think I'd highlight that. And then the other piece is that one of the reasons I'm looking forward to the possibility of serving on the committee is that my conversations with Chief Pullen have been productive and collegial. And I look forward to working with him and his team as well. And then, of course, thinking about areas of improvement, my interest right now is in how we address situations that are at the intersection of mental health crises and public safety concerns. The police department's often called to scenes that require intervention from mental health professionals. And I feel as a community right now, we're not set up to handle these situations as well as we could. A lot of communities are facing this, and there are opportunities for development and growth and how we address those with what we know now that we haven't always known as community leaders. So I think we need to increase our knowledge as a town about the best practices for handling mental health emergencies. So I'm hoping to work together with other volunteers with the select board and the police department to improve our responses, especially to those mental health crises in town.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
I'm all set. Thank you, Alexis.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay.
Selectwoman Gilman.
I am all set also, and thank you for taking us on.
Thank you.
Alexis, thank you for your interest, your application, and your time this evening.
Absolutely. I appreciate the work that you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next applicant is Mr. Darius Thompson, who's just joined us, I think. Hi, Darius.
Unmute here. Nico, how are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Outstanding. That's a great day.
Good. Again, if you could just spend a couple minutes telling us a little bit about you and your interest in the commission, and then we'll ask some questions.
Certainly. Where to start? So I grew up in Dover, Delaware, moved to Arlington, Virginia. Went to one of the first integrated elementary schools in Virginia at the time. Was Glebe Elementary. Glebe Elementary, and we were actually living in a predominantly black neighborhood, which is called Halls Hill in Arlington, Virginia. And Arlington is a diverse population, much more diverse than here in Exeter, New Hampshire. Fast forward to the middle of high school, my dad decided to buy a roller skating rink, and I moved to Livermore Falls, Maine, where I was one of two families of color in the town, the two neighboring towns. In the process of 24 years of owning and operating a roller skating rink, we became involved with the community and brought a lot of awareness to, one, who we are, our values, and more importantly, being involved, engaged in the community. Such that through my father, through my family being involved, we had this memorial service. We had kids of kids of kids that were impacted by the outreach and community engagement involvement that we did. We also worked with children that had developmental disabilities and challenges, and they sometimes brought those into the roller skating rink. But through my dad's professional background of being a mental health worker and my stepmother being a teacher, gained firsthand experience on conflict resolution, how to be involved, engaged when the police need to be called, worked with them on that, and also worked with our department many, many years ago to help support the community and deal with different issues. Fast forward now, for the last 40 some odd years, I've been a resident of New Hampshire. I graduated, went to Plymouth State College. I say college, but I know we have an alumni on the board that also went to Plymouth. But through being involved with Plymouth, I got involved in being a resident assistant, and then got quickly engaged with forming, after I came back for my graduate degree, founded the African American Society, well, the Black Student Union, which became the African American Society, that is now in effect, and also being involved, engaged with diversity, inclusion, all those different issues back in the 80s and 90s. So fast forward now, as many of you know, I've been involved and engaged here in town. I've served on a couple of different boards, Technology Committee, which has been disbanded, Arts Committee, also a multi-year volunteer with putting on the annual holiday parade, which definitely involves interacting, engaging, and learning about our community, and also working with our police department. Also, as an African-American male, I have had engagements, encounters of simple traffic stops and those things. I've had the talks with my daughters who are not African American, but how to talk with them on how to do certain things when they get stopped. So most importantly, I bring a unique perspective of being someone that has been in New England. I'm not from here originally, but I've lived here and lived in this community for well over 20 plus years. And you all know my involvement, engagement, and support of not only our police department, Chief Poulin, as also Chief Shoup. I've also worked with Chief Kane as well, very closely in interactions throughout the many years I've been involved in this community. So,
thank you.
Yep.
Selectman Brown.
There. Hi, Darius. Thanks for applying. Could you speak to economic diversity in the framework of policing of the town?
Economic diversity and policing of the town. I think that the police officers and policing in the town should be the same across the board, whether you are on the lower end of the economic spectrum or if you're on the upper end of the economic spectrum. Everybody should be treated the same. And most importantly, the attention and the patrols and all the things that they do should be equally visible and present in all areas of the town. We do have some socioeconomic challenges here in the town. There are people that are struggling, and there are people that are doing well to do. To not acknowledge that, or to not say that that's not an issue or not something to pay attention to, would be, I guess, misleading. So we are a small town of approximately 14,000 to 16,000 waiting for the census to be done to see where we're at. We are a small town. We have a lot of highly educated people that are here, but we also have a very good community here, but it's not without its challenges.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. And if I may ask, I believe you went to Plymouth when?
I was a professor there from 2001 to 2010.
So it was just after I'd been there early in the 90s. So I'm sure we may know some professors in common. So
computer science, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Great, thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi, Darius. It's great to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for applying. And my question is the same question that I've asked to all the applicants as well, and that is, where do you see the Exeter Police Department doing well? And then what are the areas you think could be improved?
Well, not knowing firsthand what the officers go through on every single call, that's something I do not have that perspective of, and I don't think any of us really do. But what they do well, they do the serve and protect. They do well in terms of they've done a lot better with community policing, having coffee with a cop that was started under Shoup. I think it's been carried on since then. But they do give us a sense of security. We don't really hear of a lot of issues that have come to the forefront in social media and other things with our police force. But I think that there's one of the things that they may be tasked with, and just observationally, is they may be tasked with doing things that might be outside of the scope of their professional capabilities. Not saying that they can't handle it, but they aren't necessarily particularly trained to handle wellness checks and other things, when we might be able to look at utilizing different resources to do that, so that the police officers can more focus on other things that are more equally as important, but just allocation of their time and resources. So there's only so many man hours in a day, there's only so many man hours in a week, and we're asking a lot of our officers to do more than what their job responsibilities are. So, and I think they're doing a good job at least recognizing this as an opportunity to see, well, what do they do good? What do they not do so good? And because I live in one neighborhood, I may not know what happens in another neighborhood, but this is an opportunity to find out more about our community and town, to see where things can be improved, and hear from other citizens as well, and to be an advocate for that, to say that, all right, these are some things we can do better.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
Thank you, Jerry, so much for applying. I'm all set for questions.
Okay. Selectwoman Gilman.
Same for me. Thank you, Darius.
No questions?
No questions.
How are you doing, by the way?
I am doing well. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Darius, thank you for your application.
Wait a minute, Darius, you didn't ask me how I was doing.
I was about. Okay. So, Lovey, how are you doing?
I'm quite well, thank you, Darius.
And are you enjoying your role as a select woman?
It's been a wonderful ride thus far, but thank you.
Excellent. Good.
Darius, thank you for your application, interest in the commission, and again, also thank you for all of the volunteer work that you've done in the town throughout the years. Nice to see you.
Yep, likewise. No questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
All right. So the only thing I want to say is this, that whether you decide to select me to serve on this, and again, it's a different perspective of an African-American male, that's different. I've had, interactions of being stopped, and I've had good experiences with those officers here. But I do believe, in some of my experience in working with Raytheon and doing diversity and inclusion and sensitivity training, bias, and different being involved from a human resources perspective, there's an opportunity to be engaged and to help our community. And if I'm not selected on this committee, so be it. It will not stop me from being engaged and involved. And the committee is the committee. That's great. But to be able to have conversations with our police chief, Poole, and I've worked with him many years, is something that I will continue to do regardless. But I do thank you for your consideration. And most importantly, I want to thank you all for taking the time to speak with me. And we'll keep it to the time limits. So we're good.
Great. Darius, thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, and the last applicant this evening, Mr. Harry King, is back, and he and I were able to speak before the meeting started. We can see him this week, and we can hear him very well. So, Mr. King, thank you for coming back this evening, and thank you for your patience. I apologize for last week. I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in the commission.
Well, my interest in the police is that the policing is such a fundamental organization of society, and the police can either create a more inclusive society or a society where people are at each other's throats. And unfortunately, over the past few years, particularly under President Trump, we've seen it go in that direction. Sadly, many of the policing organizations are backers of Trump. We saw that in New York City, where, of course, one of the outstanding events have been the strangling of a individual who was stopped by the police, and he was murdered. But I was interested in the basic question of how can we keep the police, white police, from shooting black men in the back? And that's what started me off on this. My background was that I got a degree in social relations, which is a strange kind of a degree which combines sociology, psychology, and anthropology. And it provides you with a diversity of view about society and particularly in institutions such as the police. So I started doing a study of this. I have been working on a paper called Healing the Police Minority Divide. And I've had the good fortune of running into Bruce Page, who is a community officer here. And so when I'm discussing various ideas, why he is an enormous help in terms of giving me a police reaction to it. But one of the things which are outstanding in the study of this is that there really are two types of policing. We've got an authoritarian type of policing, or another type of policing which is democratic. And police organizations, certainly such as this in Exeter, are moving in the direction of a democratic organization. But one of the fundamental things which are very, very important in the policing that was found by actually Sir Robert Peel. This goes back to about the 1820s when this system of policing was first devised, where rather than being repressive, as policing has been, to a police that are encouraging this personal social relationship and the confidence of the populace by providing services. And one of the things that I've been hoping that we could do is moving the police away from law enforcement to public protection, where the police will view themselves as the protectors of society and not the enforcers of rule. So I think one of the things which are most important is, first of all, the police is the selection of people. We need to have the right type of people. And one of the problems, of course, in policing is that most of the people who are hired for policing have a military background. Some of those people can be excellent in terms of of working with people in a society, but an awful lot more are primarily focused on the enforcement, and that unfortunately is a very popular term with the police. But the police, in fact, I think, first of all, it's the matter of the selection of people. And one of the things that are important in people is that the police not be prejudiced. The police should not be prejudiced against anybody, whether they're black or white, or whether they're male or female, or there are those who are prejudiced against those who are handicapped in one way or another, by age, by the way in which they happen to be born. But it's very important, I think, for the police not be prejudiced. And then I think the whole training regime, which is used by the police, should move in the direction of being assisters of people and providing services which develop a feeling of confidence in the community towards the police. And I think that is an extraordinarily important thing, and having that kind of contact. And one of the things I think that certainly needs to be worked on here in Exeter is having more contact. And one of the things in selection, I think, that needs to be present, is I think that there should be far more women in policing. I think compassion is an important factor in personnel of police, because if there isn't a compassion out there, then there's a tendency for people to move in directions of hostility towards a particular victim who is perhaps they're a lawbreaker, but still the police they're citizens, and the police are there to provide services to them, not to punish them. And I think that's one of the major points that were brought up by Sir Robert Peel, even going back to this 1830s. And this style of policing, which I call democratic, is really the one which has been used in England. And in fact, we've been trying to adopt it here in this country. The whole COPS program, which is part of the Department of Justice, was supposed to go in that direction. Unfortunately, it has moved more towards the militarization of the police. But that's something which I think is the wrong direction to go in police. I think the direction is the improvement of contact and the sensitivity of the police to the total needs of the community. I could go on much further, but I better stop here.
Well, that was very interesting, Mr. King. I know the board is very excited to ask some questions. So if we may, Selectman Brown.
Yep. Thank you for your application, Mr. King. The question is about economic diversity in policing and how you think that the economic diversity of the town presents challenges or opportunities for the department.
That, of course, is an important point. And those who are more economically disadvantaged frequently in a situation where they're more likely to have contact with the police. And the police should not provide. Well, the police should be a source of support to aid people who are in economic distress in one way or another. And one of the great people was a Professor Trajanowitz at Michigan State, and he said the police really should be social workers with guns. And I think that sums up the relationship of the individual, regardless of what the circumstance is, to the police.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Selectwoman Cowan.
Hi, Mr. King. Thank you so much for bearing with us on our second try here. We're so glad to have you and to be able to hear you properly tonight. My question is, from your perspective, what is going well with the Exeter Police Department, and what are areas that you could see or that you would note for improvement?
I think one of the things which are important is that there be more women involved in policing. I think that's an important thing. I'd like to see a police force that was 50% female. I think that would have an enormous effect upon improving the quality of policing.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
Mr. King, I just have to thank you very much for all of your feedback, and I'm really happy that we had a chance to hear you much more clearly this time around. I don't have any specific questions, but I do want to thank you for everything that you've said tonight, because I think it's a lot of things that we need to hear and have discussions about. So thank you very much.
Selectwoman Gilman.
So I want to thank you, Mr. King, for volunteering. I really appreciate somebody mentioning Sir Robert Peel from way back in the 1800s, but there are lessons to learn there. And I'm also intrigued by the anthropology side of your view on how sociology and psychology work. So thank you. Those are some considerations. So thank you very much.
Mr. King, thank you for volunteering and your application. Thank you for your time this evening. It was a pleasure meeting you and listening to you. And again, I want to thank you for coming tonight again.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night. Okay, that concludes our board interviews for this evening. Next on the agenda, we have public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to have comment. We do ask that if your comments are with regard to anything on the agenda, that you wait for that agenda item to come up. But if not, I'll pause for a moment and see if we have any hands up. This is an opportunity for public comment. I see Laura Knott with her hand up.
Hi, yes, this is Laura Knott.
Laura, could you just state your address for us for the record?
Yes, I live at 15 Tamarind Lane in Exeter.
Thank you.
My question is related to a couple warrant articles that were voted on, and I'll give some history, but it relates to the Kingston Road Sidewalk Project, which is Route 111 in case anybody is not familiar. So the town voted and we approved back in 2015 a $750,000 appropriation, 150 of which came from the Arterial Shoulder Widening Capital Reserve Fund, and then 600,000 came from the New Hampshire DOT grant, which is was a TAP fund, transportation authors. I don't know what it stands for, but it was a grant that we were awarded. So we voted yes to appropriate and raise those funds back in March of 2015. In 2017, the funds were going to be expired in December of 2017. So at the March 2017 town meeting, we had two more articles that we voted on there. One to extend the deadline to December 31st, 2020 to complete the project. And the other was to amend it and add an additional $305,000 to adding sidewalks as well as widening the shoulders of the road to create bike paths. $185,000 of that 305 was raised by taxation, and the remaining $120,000 was funded through NHDOT grant funds. So both of those articles passed. I have been in contact with Jennifer Mates from the Public Works Director, and I've also copied Paul Vlach, the town engineer, Jennifer Mates, the assistant engineer, and Tricia Allen, the office manager, on approximately 10 emails back and forth over the last 2.5 years regarding this issue of when these sidewalks are going to be built. And as of 2018, April, it was still scheduled for construction this year. It will likely happen late summer, early fall. She was acquiring I checked in again in March of 2020. They were still working on acquiring easements. May, they were still working on easements. And then again in May, there it is. There was, I had said, if there's certain easements you need and you'd like me to talk to anybody to obtain those, I know the funds are going to run out in December. And so I really want to see this project done, or at least began. I really haven't gotten any updates from her. And so I was hoping if anybody on the select board can fill me in on where we are on this project, and then what happens if we don't complete it by December of 2020, which is looking very likely at this point. What happens to those funds that the town has appropriated, as well as what the state has provided to us?
Sure, Laura, thank you for your comment and your question. Mr. Dean, can you give us an update on the project? And if not, then I'd be happy to get back to Laura in the next day or two. Russ, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. My conversations with the DPW director, Jennifer Perry, we've obtained 5 out of the 13 easements for the project, and the highway superintendent's been assisting with procuring these easements. And the DOT has indicated the project financing is pushed out to FY23, but may be available sooner, and a new warrant article will be required to extend the project timeline. That's the very latest update I have as of September 15th. And I believe Jennifer's on the call, so if she wants to add anything to that, she certainly can.
Director Perry, do you have anything to add?
No, that is the latest report. That is recent update that we gave to the town manager. And as he mentioned, we are in the queue for 2023 at this time with New Hampshire DOT projects. However, frequently there are extensions to projects, and there may be an opportunity for the town of Exeter to get into an earlier queue. We missed our opportunity for this year. That is correct. We have had some challenges with getting that project wrapped up. There are many reasons that I don't want to go into right tonight, but I think it's reasonable to put forward a warrant article, and that was the last part of my note to the town manager, to put forward a warrant article for next year that does extend it to 2023. I would expect that we would get it done sooner than then, and also the state's fiscal year does not align with ours. So when they say 2023, it's actually October of 2022 that it would start and run through October of 2023. And that's the only other piece that I can add.
Mr. Dean, could we put this topic on an agenda for a future meeting in the near future, just to kind of bring the public up to date as to where we are?
Sure, we can do that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Laura, did that satisfy your question? Or if not, then I'd be happy to talk with you later this week. I think she's still there. Hi, Laura, can you hear me?
There we go. I can hear you. Yes, thank you. That although it's a very confusing, I'm not quite sure what it means that we're in the queue for 2023, but if we schedule this for another meeting, that would be fine. I would really appreciate some discussion on this and adding the warrant article as well for March, I would assume. I hope that does not mean that we need to reapply for the TAP grant. I guess that's the concern I have.
No, we would not have to make a full application. It's an extension of the existing application, and the project has already been approved in their group. It's just that we did not meet the deadline as far as the state was concerned, and they offer it to the next projects that are ready. And that's why we would hope that perhaps we'd be able to obtain a project approval for an earlier year than 2023, because it isn't uncommon. What happened to us does happen to others too.
Okay, I see. So right now we are funded for it to happen in 2023 per the state, but hopefully we can get the town to do it earlier and appropriate our funds internally, or Exeter's funds through 2023 at least. Okay. Thank
Correct.
you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Laura, thank you for your comment, and we will have this on the agenda in the near future.
Thank you.
And I'm just looking to see if there are any other hands up. Seeing none, then I will close the public vote. Darius Thompson. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you. Darius Thompson, 15 Drinkwater Road, Exeter, New Hampshire. Just a general question overall, with the impact of COVID and funding for matching for all the projects that we have ongoing, are we prepared to continue to seek additional funding as the new FY year starts for the government, to seek additional funding from the state? And two, of the ongoing or planned projects that are necessary to be done, are we on schedule, on track, and or are we funded for those different projects to occur in the current fiscal year and also for the next fiscal year and the one after that?
The short answer, Mr. Thompson, is yes, we are seeking all available funds from the federal and state governments. And we just had our first Budget Recommendations Committee meeting last week. Mr. Dean, if you want to just give a quick overview that will answer the second part of Mr. Thompson's question.
It was to pursue any, and are the projects in the queue and going
correct.
on? That's right. Yes, they are. The short answer is yes on all fronts. We did make a reduction in our paving budget this year of $200,000 to sort of hedge against potential lost revenues and be able to add that back to our fund balance. So we spent $6 out of the $800,000. But all of our projects are being worked on diligently by Public Works at this point.
And I do want to say that outstanding, the Public Works have been doing a tremendous job getting things done. I've noticed a lot of the work they've, but they have gotten a lot of stuff done. But most importantly, the men and women out there doing everything on every day. So I appreciate it. The only other question I had is that, are we looking wastewater treatment to help fund that, or are we in a good spot, or do we just not know yet?
The short answer to that question is yes, we are looking to a next rate increase. And I think the board members probably know I was in an article in the Seacoast Sunday newspaper talking about some of these issues, all of them really. And we have delayed a rate increase because of COVID that we really need to implement on the wastewater side to keep our wastewater fund solvent and make sure that we're meeting our commitments there. So there is at least one more rate increase to go. And if the state aid grant money does not materialize to offset the wastewater treatment facility project, there may be an increase on top of that increase, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, and that's concerning. Are we looking at other ways to help offset those increases through either additional fees or other things that may be able to help out? Maybe $1 increase on the bags or something like that. I think that, you know, it's unfortunate that we do have to have these rate increases, but to continue to have them and to pay for them infinitely, we hope that at some point in time that there is a reduction in those rates once things have been paid for and the investments, the projects have been completed. But hopefully we won't have any more surprises like that. But we understand that there are unforeseen events that occur. But I think what would be very prudent upon the Budget Recommendations Committee as well as the Select Board to make certain that we're keeping an eye on where our tax dollars are going and to make certain that we don't have these surprises or we can mitigate against them. So there's not another increase on top of being in a pandemic, on top of, rate increases and other things that occur. So hopefully we can work those things out and minimize those impacts. So I appreciate all the work you guys do. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Yep.
Any other public comment this evening? Okay, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'll close public comment. We do not have any proclamations or recognitions this evening, so we'll jump to the approval of
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I was actually hoping, and I don't know that now is an appropriate time to do this, but I would like to make a motion to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day in advance of the day that we're celebrating.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second to Selectwoman Cowan's motion? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
Any repercussions for this as far as wages or staff or holiday time?
I'm not proposing to change anything in statute. I just want to change the day from being called Columbus to honoring the people who lived here, the Squamscott tribe, and would respectfully request that we honor what seems to be the wishes of people we are serving, of the founders of this community, and move our town forward.
Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand Selectman Brown's concern because everywhere is documented as Columbus Day is the national holiday. So there's a technical thing in there, but I am completely behind changing the name of the day that we celebrate here. And as you may recall, we did have a bill at the State House that was going along very well, had bipartisan support, failed at the last minute with an impassioned plea from one of the state reps. But I am for this. It's time to I don't know if you want to say move back or move on, but there's some recognition that needs to occur. We didn't get here first, and we owe a lot of what we have to who was here first.
Mr. Dean? I'm sorry, Selectman Brown.
Okay, just to that point, would it be wise to have some document that links, that basically says this is also known as this, in terms of if there's funding or anything related to holiday pay, or, so just something that makes a correlation between whatever we call the day and anything else fiduciary that might be related to the town that refers to that day as something else. So basically just...
I'm sorry, Selectman Brown, I didn't know you weren't done.
I'm done.
Okay. My comment on this would be if the board makes this determination that this is something you want to support and the motion confirms that, what we would do is just from a town perspective, personnel policy wise, we would simply interpret the former Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day as the holiday, if that makes sense. So we wouldn't change from a practical perspective anything we do on that day. It would still be, it is Columbus Day in our collective bargaining agreements. It also is Columbus Day in our personnel policy. The easiest thing to do quickly is to bring the personnel policy to you for that change. But again, I don't think we need to do that until the board makes a determination, and then we can do that as more of a formality later on. But we would interpret it just the same. So given that situation, I wouldn't expect any issues from the workforce or anything like that.
Thanks, Russ. And then just final question, is this the appropriate place to do this? As far as like, is this within our charge? Should we be putting this up on the ballot? Again, just due diligence questions.
The board can choose to recognize, I know in our bargaining agreements, the town has the ability through the board to recognize holidays that the board is inclined to recognize. So if you want to do that, you certainly have the ability to do that. And we did that, those of you who remember Selectman Aldrich when he was here, Julie will remember for sure, we instituted Civil Rights Day. We had not actually observed that as a town holiday, and we did adopt that back during Selectman Aldrich's tenure on the board. So there's precedent for it as well.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Gilman.
I'm not really recalling why I put my hand up. I think you answered my question through Selectman Brown. But I would like to say that there is another bill being proposed at the State House to make it a statewide matter.
I'm really glad to hear that. I am also excited that Exeter could be leading the way.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Chair says aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Selectwoman Cowan, for the motion. Okay, next we have the approval of our Exeter Select Board meeting minutes of September 28th, 2020. I'll ask at this time if there are any amendments or revisions to the minutes, and if not, then I would seek a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
The motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, are those in the packet? Did you get those? Joanna's shaking her head no. I was just going to say, I didn't think they were in there, so I know they're not necessarily in front of you, and they were set up to be approved tonight, so they were on the agenda, so I apologize for the confusion there, but with the 1 week lag in between meetings, we just didn't get them.
Okay, so in that case...
I withdraw my motion.
Thank you.
I will, and Joanna, I do want to say Joanna also took the minutes at the Budget Recommendations Committee last Wednesday night, so I want to reiterate how blessed we are to have her, and her availability is fantastic, and so are her minutes. So thank you, Joanna.
And I have to say that I was recalling. I have 3 meetings next week, and I was reading the meeting minutes from those 3 things. So it just got lumped into my. I approve of all the minutes that I read. So I'm sorry for that.
Okay, so Mr. Dean, we can look to approve both sets of minutes, September 28th and this evening's on the 19th.
Yes, that would be the plan.
Great, thank you. Okay, next we interviewed Mark DeTore last week for the alternate spot on the planning board. So at this time, I would look for a motion to appoint Mark DeTore as an alternate member of the planning board, term to expire April 30th, 2022.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
The clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. DeTore. Okay, we get into our discussion items. First, on the agenda, we have discussion on Halloween and trick-or-treating. We had some interesting guidelines that were presented in our packet that I'm sure we've all reviewed. I think we have Mr. Murray and Melissa Roy and Greg Bisson are here to give us a little bit of background and perhaps make a recommendation. And then as a board, we can discuss. And if after that there's anybody in the public that wishes to weigh in, certainly we'd welcome that. So with that, James, why don't I turn it over to you?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So we had a meeting with the NHMA, the New Hampshire Municipal Association, on the 30th. It was kind of to give guidance to municipalities throughout the state, and they sent that guidance down to us, just some general ideas on how to do trick-or-treat safely and a little bit more about their the guidance to municipalities in general. From that, as you know, before the CDC put out their recommendations for high, medium, and low risk activities, I was able to discuss with Greg, Melissa, Chief Poulin, just kind of our thoughts on the meetings, and really kind of hinge down on what other communities we're going to be doing as well. Halloween and trick-or-treat are a little unique in that it's not just something that we would or would not be having in our community. It's something that would be occurring simultaneously through other towns in the area. So with that, we reached out to other communities and found that most of them, Epping, Hampton, Portsmouth, they all plan to have trick-or-treat on Saturday the 31st. I think it makes sense for Exeter to do so as well. If all the communities have it within their own communities and families are encouraged to keep it local, I think that's a positive thing. It's doable, and there are some safety precautions we've come up with as well to help do it safely. So I'm just pulling up the packet because I don't have it in front of me. If Greg or Melissa want to add to this.
Sure, Greg or Melissa, or one of you.
Yes, we actually have, if I can share my screen real quick, a little presentation. James and everyone looked it over, so let me do this. All right. Welcome to Google Slides and COVID in 2021. So you'll see the CDC guidelines, that James referred to. I'm just gonna gloss over these because really it's our recommendations how to hold them safely. Low risk, pumpkin carving, decorating of houses, our scarecrow contest. Sorry for the plug. Medium risk, participating in one-way trick-or-treat, having small groups, open-air costume parades. And everyone can find these right on the CDC website. So high risk is the traditional trick-or-treat, handing out door-to-door. We can do this safely, and here's our recommendations from the state. If you noticed, they left it in our hands. So having talked with everyone, these are some safety tips, and James made up a poster that we can also distribute. Encouraging 6 feet social distancing for trick-or-treaters and candy givers. Trick-or-treat in small groups with only family members, preferably, or close friends that are frequent. I know a lot of neighborhoods, they've created their own pods. So that's one way to do it. Stay in your neighborhood as much as possible. I know it is tempting to go to some of those great neighborhoods that give out full-size candy bars. We understand that, but play it safe and stay local. Incorporate masks into your costume. That's one of the things that we're kind of emphasizing. We want people to wear masks as much as possible trick-or-treating, but do not put the plastic masks over the face covering. That could create a suffocation problem. Hand sanitizer. Use between houses. Don't use gloves. That's the one thing that everyone has been told. Don't use gloves. Candy givers should not pass out individual candy to individual kids, but to hand out at the doorstep or a small table in front. If they could, do a barrier as well. Stand behind your storm door or 6 feet away from the table that you're handing out candy. Unfortunately for the older kids, I know this is a Debbie Downer, but the parents should maybe accompany their kids to make sure social distancing and sanitation is followed. I know a lot of the older kids like to go out by themselves. It's the rite of passage. If we're recommending that most parents go out with them. If the homes do not want to participate, please keep your lights off, put up a sign. We could create signage as well that people could print off to tell them they're not participating. And then if a parent really feels uncomfortable, they can just hand out candy themselves, going door to door. Or just if a family or anyone does not feel like participating, unfortunately, this might be a year to take off. So that is our recommendations. And as James said, we've gone back and forth, and after listening to the guidance, I think cancellation would be unenforceable and cause other risks that could cause the spread of COVID. So we recommend going along with trick or treat at the normal time on the 31st.
Great, thank you, Greg. That was a good presentation. Obviously, this would be strictly at the discretion of every family. It would be voluntary. Are you recommending a time of day that would be best? I know traditionally it's 4 to 7.
It's actually been 5 to 8, I believe, or 4 to 7. You are correct, Mr. Chair. We did discuss moving it earlier, but that creates the problem of if no one wants to participate and they have their lights off, how do you know if the lights are on? So keeping it at the normal time, I think would be best for us here. That way people that do not want to participate can easily keep their lights off. And I think it'll be fine. I know Exeter and Chief Poulin and his police officers will be out there keeping everyone safe.
Okay. James, did you have anything else to add?
No, that was all.
Okay. Comments or questions from the board? Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf?
I guess I just want to go back to the earlier rather than later. My gut reaction is that doing it more during daylight hours makes more sense if we want to have people safely engaging in trick-or-treating. You know, it's going to be a rough go regardless, because kids are going to want to be with their friends versus just their siblings or their immediate pods. So I'm just trying to think what would make it easier for parents who are having to follow along. And I think daylight hours makes more sense. I would rather shift in the direction of, okay, it's not what we're used to, but we're still making it something that's available to town members, rather than outright saying no, that we're going to cancel it this year. So I don't know if it's something that we can discuss further, but I would rather see it during daylight hours than, because once it gets dark, it's so hard to see what's going on.
No, I think that's right. I agree with you. Selectwoman Cowan.
I was just going to ask what the sense from our safety team. What are other communities doing?
Everyone that we spoke to is keeping it their traditional times, except for Portsmouth. Portsmouth moved it to 3 to 6. The one potential about moving it earlier now creates an opportunity where those kids that are used to double dipping for Halloween, parents may travel to another community, hence Exeter, and come here and then go there. But everyone has kept it the same. And moving it earlier, we had planned our reverse Halloween parade where we're going to go around town from 12 to 4. So we can work with whatever you guys propose.
Mr. Dean?
My opinion would be that we should really consider the 3 to 6 window. I do like the fact that Portsmouth moved theirs. I think that's smart for the right reasons, and I think Greenland has done the same thing. So hopefully our residents will stick around, stay close, and I think they will. And that would be one of the bits of advice, obviously, that we'll be encouraging people as much as we can. But I think you can see a light on or off if it's, we'll just have to market the event like that and make sure people know that the light on off makes the difference, and along with all the safety precautions. So I would advocate for 3 to 6 and getting it wrapped up before it really gets dark and cooler and colder.
Mm-hmm.
And the 31st is a good day. I recommend that as well, the Saturday, the 31st, the actual date.
We have Select Woman Gilman with her hand, and then Select Woman Roundtree Olaf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I applaud the research and the considerations and the comparisons that you folks have done, because it's been a question that I've been asked. And I want to say, just speaking for myself, I have always socially distanced Halloween because I cannot stand it. So if you came to my house, there would be a bowl out in front of the house. So this is, I think there's some really great imaginative things that people can do to keep their kids who are traveling door to door safe, and the folks at home also have a play in it, I guess is the word. But thank you, and I agree with the earlier hour.
Thank you. Select Woman Roundtree Olaf.
And just to add, I know that we had a conversation about a communications committee and how we get messaging out. If we can make a decision early on, i.e. now, then we can start to disseminate to others and say, this is what we're thinking. If communities, neighborhoods can start messaging to say, okay, who is actively going to participate in Halloween? You have a list of houses that are on the route, because we're lucky to live in a place where there are lots of streets that have sort of starts and ends of neighborhoods. So kind of putting the onus also on neighborhoods that can handle that kind of communication internally. And yes, I'll say again, the earlier hours, and because it's a Saturday, that makes it even easier for a lot of people. And then it just gives people time to sort of do waves and get a feel for, this is a little too much, or this is okay. And, just gently request that people stay within their respective, like I'm in a neighborhood where there are 12 houses, so we don't get the same fun that other neighborhoods get, but it'll be the year that we sort of rally and enjoy ourselves on a more intimate level. But this is the year of sacrifice. And so I think if we can do this and still allow kids to be able to get out and have some fun, then let's figure out the best way to do it possible.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Select Woman Gilman?
No, I was going to say something, but I think it's better I don't. So I think these are good plans, and I'll say that in my experience when my girls were small, we didn't do the double dipping. All their friends did because they were from out of town. And they loved to come to our house and go down our neighborhood because it was nice and long and big, and they got lots more candy. So just be aware. If we're all doing it at the same time, then maybe that won't happen if all the towns are doing it. So thank you.
No, that's a good point. And I agree with Select Woman Roundtree Olaf. I think with all of the sacrifices that we've all made, particularly our kids, and starting school virtually, I think that James and Greg and the chiefs and everybody that's worked on this plan are giving the kids an opportunity to have a little bit of fun. And it sounds like we can safely do this. I think that having it on Saturday, in late afternoon, 3 to 6, works out well. Again, it's at the discretion of each family. It's purely voluntary. I would ask that those that are partaking in trick-or-treating, though, be respectful of the homes that don't have their lights on, and move on. Mr. Beeson, I know that you and the rec committee have worked really hard to set up this parade. You described it. You don't need to describe it again, but you talked about it at the last meeting. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for those families that do not feel safe trick-or-treating. Where we may be making this decision so early on in the month, can you adjust the parade hours from, let's say, 10 to 2 or 11 to 3? Or
yeah,
possible?
Chairman, we'll figure it out. We wanted to spring joy, and if this is just the highlight that you can get your kids in their Halloween costumes right after bed and get ready for a Halloween parade, sure, let's do it. We can adapt.
Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes, just one more thing. If folks would read the recommendations from the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and Greg, they might be in your slideshow, but it went too fast for me to see. Kids and parents can, some of the suggestions were individually wrapping, a couple pieces of candy in small bags. So this could be an activity for parents and kids to do before actually going out and trick-or-treating, just to add something more fun to the whole night. I thought it was a good idea. Is anybody doing trunk or treating? Do you know?
Kingston is holding a trunk or treat event. That's the only one I know. If you actually listen to the CDC guidelines, they actually are not approving that. It's a higher risk activity. But if they're spread out, I think it should be fine as long as it's a one-way traffic in that trunk or treat. So I don't know of anyone else in the area holding one.
So, Mr. Beeson, I think obviously in addition to, social distancing, hand sanitizer between homes, wearing the masks, all of the, the common sense things that are being suggested in everyday way of living through COVID, is there a way that, or multiple ways we can get out these suggestions? Obviously, the Park and Rec Facebook page, perhaps you could contact the newspaper to publish some of this. Selectman Brown, I don't know when the communications committee is meeting again, but perhaps something they can help us with.
Yeah, I believe
the town website.
Yeah, I believe tomorrow morning is our next meeting.
Great.
And we also, Mr. Chair, have a constant contact email list of about 4,000 people. So we can send out multiple emails throughout the month just to keep reminding people, put it on Facebook. We'll put on the town Facebook page. I think working with Russ, they can definitely do that. And I'll contact the newspaper, and anything that the communications committee can help with, that would be outstanding. And we can actually contact the SAU, and they've been really great about pushing out the information that we've been providing them. So that's another opportunity for us.
Any other suggestions from any other board members?
No, Mr. Chair, I would like to move forward with the Halloween celebration plans as presented by our department, Parks and Recreation Department, on October 31st from 3 to 6 p.m.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan. Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Motion passes. Mr. Murray, Mr. Beeson, and Melissa, thank you for the work that you've done, along with Chief Poulin and everybody else that contributed to this. Okay, next we have a memo in our packet from the town planner, Dave Sharples, letting us know of his intent to issue a request for proposal and RFP for a potential solar array at the town landfill site off of Cross Road. Is Mr. Sharples here to speak to this, Mr. Dean?
Yes, he sure is. Dave was having a few issues. I think if he can be brought into the panelist arena, he's actually on right now as an attendee. So I recommend we start there and see if we can get him into the panelist ring here. There he is.
Hey, Dave, you with us?
I'm with you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you well. In your presentation, please, if you would also, if you could address some of the concerns that you indicated that the DPW may have, and also describe the panel that would be reviewing and selecting the RFP sources.
DPW. Okay. Well, I don't know, about a couple years ago, a year and a half ago, I started a discussion with Russ about potentially looking at the closed landfill off Crossroad and utilize it as a solar array. Apparently there was some discussion prior to that, but it really didn't get to a point where there was an answer whether it was feasible or not. And so I thought that I think it's prudent to get to that point and see if it is feasible. And if it is, and then, bring something forward and see if the select board and potentially the town would want to engage in a project such as that. So I went around, I talked to several people. I talked to the Sustainability Advisory Committee. I talked to the Energy Committee. Both of them are very supportive of this effort. And just to give you a little background, thank you, Russ. He shared his screen. He put up a map of the site, and roughly the area that would be a potential solar array is outlined in red hatched, and it's about 8 acres. There is some topography there. There's some, dips and so forth. So it may or may not be, all be usable, but that's where the RFP comes in. So I got a positive feedback from the Energy and Sustainability Committee. I went to DPW. They had several concerns. Their concerns were about shifting and settling of the landfill. That was one of them, but there hasn't been any geotech or any type of analysis to see if that's feasible or not feasible. And that's something that, we would do as we move forward with the project and looking into it. If, the town wanted to put out an RFP, we can put out an RFP, get a developer on board and start diving into some of those questions. They're also concerned about maintenance issues and trespassing. And generally I've worked with this on a closed landfill. I've gotten to the point of approval for a solar array, and it was actually a Superfund site. So it was even a little more, another layer of complication. It was actually quite complicated, had a lot of the same issues about settling and so forth, and they all eventually got worked through. Also another was maintenance. They were concerned about maintaining, and I was like, the devil's in the details. Any type you get into a lease agreement or however, you'd structure it, any type of agreement, you'd have the town's, staff would have the town's best interest in mind and make sure that, maintenance was taken care of by the developer, whoever did develop it, if it got to that point, and they would be responsible for maintaining it, mowing the grass and so forth. Also, they didn't want it to disrupt their operations on the site. That is an active, composting, leaf litter drop off, storage, and so forth, several other tasks of the DPW. And they just asked to be included in all steps of the process. And I copied them, I provided them this memo. I've kept them in the loop. I guess where I was coming is there a fatal flaw to this property? And I haven't found one yet. Not to say that this is feasible, but I think the next logical step to determine feasibility, to see if there's any interest on the part of solar developers to respond to this, to put out an RFP and have them respond. Also, let me back up. I did also talk to the state that does the permitting for would do permitting for a solar array, who's familiar with the site, and and the Groundwater Management Bureau, and they didn't see any issues with further exploration of the site. They didn't see any fatal flaws or red flags of this site to say it's definitely not a go. So I talked to Russ, and we decided to come to the select board, give us an update of where we're at. Really not asking for anything at this point. I just, before I put out a request for proposals to possibly have developers respond to us and be interested in a solar array and kind of go through that selection process and dive deeper into this to see if it's a feasible project. I wanted to let the select board know if you had any objections to it and so forth. And, we obviously wouldn't go through it because ultimately the select board would have to decide to lease the land and enter into any agreement if it got that far. So we wanted to bring it to you at this stage to see, without objection, we'd move forward, issue the RFP. You also asked about the panelists. The board to select a developer. I would also like to talk to Russ about this, but my first inclination was have staff people, maybe Jennifer from DPW, and have representatives potentially from the Energy Committee and the Sustainability Committee, and when we interview potential solar array developers. That would be the makeup, but I reserve the right to, discuss it with Russ first. I haven't discussed that with Russ about the particular makeup, and if he has any better suggestions or different suggestions, obviously I'd be happy to listen to that.
Thank you, Mr. Sharples. And obviously I'll defer to Mr. Dean, but I think to have representatives from both the Energy and Sustainability Committee would be prudent.
Yeah, my take on it is simply that, if we have one representative maybe from each group, we'd want to keep the group to a workable size, I would say, maybe 3 to 5 people that would serve as a review committee, if you will, if they had a level of expertise or interest in it. So member of the board, if so inclined, could partake as well. So just let us know.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Sharples from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sharples, in the lease RFP that you're putting out, you're asking about leasing the property for a solar array. And but what I hear from you, I hear you saying is it's really more of can we do this project or not, as opposed to we definitely want to do it. Tell us what your lease is.
Yeah, there's a few steps that we have to know, whether there's developer interest. First of all, they'll do some due diligence, look at the site. We'd have to, it's subject to permitting, that we'll have to do some, engineering discovery to look at the cap and the landfill and see what it would support and what the technology is, because I would assume that they're going to put it on a floating ballast. There's all these questions. So it is to lease it, but we don't know. There could be something that could stop this from happening. But I think everyone I've talked to would love to see it happen, because frankly, it could generate quite a bit of power. Probably 1.75 megawatts if I were to take a guess. It would quite an offset of the municipal operations that we use. And if it could be done, with minimal impact to the operations or no impact to DPW's operations, I see it as a win-win if we could make it happen.
Well, you're preaching to the choir. And we actually did look into that ballast system when we were siting the solar array we have out at Public Works. But since it was going over gas lines, we decided to just not put it there. So I'll be very interested in putting that RFP out there and seeing what we get for responses.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I'll put it out if I get, without objection. I'll probably put it out this week and give about 30 days to get responses back. And I know there's interest. I've already heard from a couple of folks. But also, I just wanted to mention for the public out there, because I tried to be proactive, because a couple of projects, the community in that area, kind of the southwestern Exeter neighborhood, didn't appreciate a couple of the past projects. So I went out and I contacted those folks and I sent them emails and I spoke to a couple of them and told them kind of get the word out of solar array. I've heard back from a couple. They've been very positive. One person did have some concerns and questions, like valid concerns about, methane and so forth. And as the weight pushes down, would that mean more methane? I mean, a lot of good questions. I wrote them all down. So I did let the public know out there, but I told them, once we get through it, that, there should be some more public opportunity moving forward.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Sharples? Okay, seeing none, we'll look forward to hearing back from you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next, Madam Clerk, we have the second reading of the Town Ordinance, Chapter 1610, Water Use Restrictions Update.
Yeah, let me just finish scrolling down to the thing. Okay. So once again, I'm just going to read the paragraphs that are changing. So this is our second reading. The changes proposed are to Chapter 16, Water Service Regulations. The first change is at 1610.1, just changing the name of the Board of Selectmen to the Exeter Select Board. Next is the change to 1610.3, which tells us the requirements of this section shall apply to all water users with connections receiving water from the Exeter Water Department, and under state and federally declared drought conditions, all well users within town. So we took out the word residential. It applies to all well users. And the next is Chapter 1610.8, exceptions to restrictions include the following, and we have changed to add the grass playing turf of a recreational field, the grass playing turf surfaces of a golf course, and the grass agricultural fields, including fields used for the production of sod, may be excluded from the requirements of 1610.2. And that is it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll have our third and final reading on the meeting on the 19th. Okay, Mr. Dean, next we have the classification plan update, and presumably this is your presentation?
Yes, and I'm going to go back to share screen for a moment for this, if I may. So we've been having some conversations as of late, and this request is actually, there are two positions that we're looking to add to the town's classification plan for non-union employees. The first one is the human resources and payroll accountant position. So we have been looking at our accounting specialist position over in the finance office and actually examining our human resource operations in conjunction with that, and feel that the person that's actually over in the finance office right now is doing quite a bit of human resources style functions that are not in the current job description. So Doreen Chester, our finance director, took this and reworked the job description into what you see here. So what we would be proposing is that this, the essential job functions, and again, I won't go through them in a lot of detail, but certainly if you have questions, you can ask. This would be added to the current job description, and the cross-function support for both finance and human resources function you see here. Again, with the new Munis system, a lot of this is happening out of the finance office, so this would just be confirming those things in the job description. And then the regular finance functions that the position is doing at the moment. One thing that you'll notice in these lists is that this position is doing a lot of work. And we certainly have someone very valued to the town in the position. And we want to recognize that as well. So we think it's a good synergy between the HR and the finance functions to update the job description to reflect all of these different duties and basically memorialize them. So when we do have our HR assistant, if she's out or the HR director is out, that these things are formalized in such a way that we have official backup, if you will, when that happens. So what we're proposing is adding that to the table at a grade 7, which is similar on our chart as the executive assistant, the deputy code officer, and the IT tech.
Mr. Dean, would there be any change in direct reporting?
So there would be no change in direct reporting. What we would do is have Ms. Chester continue to manage the position on a formal basis, but certainly the HR director may have some input into, workflows and operations and things like that. But we would keep the direct report line the same.
Okay, and what's the present grade now for this employee?
This is actually in the SEIU contract. It's a grade 3 at this time, so it would be actually taking it out. Having that position still in the union contract, but this position would be established as a separate non-union position with a separate scale.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Dean from the board? And I can't see the participants. Mr. Dean, you're sharing the screen, so if there's a member of the board, here we go, thank you. Okay, no questions? All right, and there's another classification you'd like change, Mr. Dean?
Right, and I'll speak to this briefly for you, and then we'll see if there are questions. This is in the sewer department, the water sewer area of Ms. Perry's department. There's a position right now for a senior operator, and actually we had described in the budget last year, we were looking to, with the new wastewater treatment facility, update that position and upgrade it because the new facility requires a primary operator. Some years back when we dealt with the water treatment area, we did the same thing with a position over there. We moved it up in the organizational chart to basically reflect it as a salaried position that was supervisory in nature, that oversaw the water operations. And we are doing the same with this as far as, so if you look at it from an equity perspective, it's sort of plant to plant. So we would propose creating an operations supervisor, again, similar to water operations supervisor. And this would end up implementing what was proposed for the FY20 budget. So it did get discussion last year during the budget process and so forth. And the details are in the memo.
No, I remember that discussion last year during the BRC deliberations. Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Dean? Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes, I just had a question on the HR finance person. We had our payroll, now it's gone out of my mind. Well, accountant anyway, retired last year. Did we not replace her?
No, we did. We did replace her, but again, as the job description was rewritten, if you look at the current job description of accounting, what we call accounting specialist, and you compare it to this, it's really night and day differences between the two. So.
No, I understand. I was just wondering if the accounts payable aspect, because I just don't remember hiring somebody, I have to say. I just was wondering if that was being rolled into a new position, but I understand.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Dean? So Russ, you'll be looking for 2 motions. One for the HR and payroll accountant and the other for the wastewater treatment operations supervisor?
Right. We usually do them one at a time. Sure.
Okay. So the motion for the HR, human resources and payroll accountant would be to reclassify this as a full-time non-union grade 7 exempt status?
Yes, that would work, or just add the position of human resources and payroll accountant to the town's non-union classification plan at a grade 7. Very similar to what you said, just a little twist.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion at this time then.
Mr. Chair, I would move to establish the position of human resources and payroll accountant at grade 7.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
And clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And then I would look for a similar motion for the wastewater treatment operations supervisor in a full-time non-union exempt at a grade 10.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
And clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have our COVID-19 update portion of our discussion items. Mr. Murray, you're in my view, so you're up first.
All right, just a quick update on COVID-19 today. Since our last meeting last week on Monday, there have been 4 new cases in Exeter. So our cumulative cases have gone from 62 to 66. And we have 5 current active cases. In the state, we're up to 490 current cases statewide, which is a sizable leap from last week. We were at 339. The state attributes this to the inclusion of antigen testing and some extra testing from the schools. 22 hospitalizations right now throughout the state as opposed to 16 last week. So seems to be right on par with what we've been experiencing, with the exception that the current cases have gone up quite a bit. Through most of September, they were between 200 and 300. Like I said, we're at 490 throughout the state right now. So in Exeter, at least, we seem to be still doing pretty good, keeping about the same.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Murray?
Yeah, Mr. Murray, you mentioned 5 active cases. What does that mean?
So on the state's website, they give a count of how many cumulative cases that we've had. Active cases are from when an individual tested positive to, I believe, about 14 to 16 days out before they drop off, unless the individual is hospitalized, it's a fatality, something like that. So a lot of the cases where individuals are tested, they're positive and sent home, the state just keeps them as an active case for the 2-week period.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Gilman.
Yes, Mr. Murray referenced the state's website, and I just wanted to give out the web link is newhampshire.gov/COVID-19. It's full of all that wonderful information that James has been referring to. But one of the things, I look at it periodically, and one of the things that when you look at the different tabs for the dashboard, you can look at one that breaks it down by age group, but one of the headings that they're following now is healthcare workers, which they hadn't been until just recently. And that's an interesting number. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but remember, this is statewide, so it's not just what's happening in Exeter. But the maps that James referred to, there's pie charts and all sorts of wonderful things by nh.gov/COVID-19. It's a wonderful read.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Murray? Okay, thank you, James. Greg and Melissa, from a Parks and Rec standpoint, do you have any COVID-19 update for us?
Nope, sorry, Mr. Chair, not at this time.
Great, okay, thank you. And then lastly, Mr. Dean, if you could, in whatever you have for us, if you could also just give us an update. I know you and Mr. Wynnum, the economic developer, have been working hard to seek any and all funding that you can for our town. So if you could add that to your update too, that'd be great.
Sure. The thing that is in your packet tonight is a group called the Seacoast Economic Development Stakeholders, writing to Taylor Caswell, who Mr. Wynnum has mentioned a few different times. And what they're trying to do is getting into something called the Business Transition Fund. They've actually created this program from an organic perspective, which I think is just a wonderful effort to try to support businesses and also target funding toward what it calls adopting businesses that are committed to adopting resilient business models, regardless of geographic region or economic sector, and according to certain principles. And this has to do all with a common thread amongst the economic developers in terms of just defining how businesses should be, if you call it, sort of prioritized, rank ordered, and looking for additional funding. So it's really a great effort that's been sponsored by the economic development people around the state from the municipal perspective, and they've been able to make quite a bit of an impact in this. So hopefully you can read up on it, and if you'd like to join in that effort, let us know and how you can be part of it. It's really an exciting concept, and I'm hoping that it really gets legs at the state because it's well written and it certainly sets up criteria that you'd want to support targeted funding going toward businesses that have these kinds of elements to them. And that's the trash getting dumped next door, so I'm going to mute myself and just go close the door. Excuse me.
Okay. I'm just going to pause because I'm not sure if he had any other COVID-19 update. Russ, did you have any update for us, or is that it?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, our budget subcommittee meetings began today, and one of the things that has been on my mind, and I would like the board to think about it some, is Selectwoman Gilman and I have talked about the concept of sort of what the pandemic means to public meetings and how we're doing this via Zoom and in the virtual environment. And one of the observations that we've made is that there's actually a big sustainability element to this process, meaning you don't have 100 people driving downtown in the dead of winter to participate in a meeting. And also the virtual environment allows people with disabilities perhaps greater access to public meetings. So I just like to put it in play that whether we are in a pandemic or not, I think the option of having virtual meetings going forward makes a tremendous amount of sense on a lot of different levels. So for now, it's just something to think about, but I think there are ways to tweak the right to know law, if you will, modify it in such a way that this becomes a permanent option going forward and not just a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think there are a lot of reasons that we can get into another time about why that is such a possibility. And I think it can impact everything from facility management to the workflow that we have on an internal basis and how we do our jobs. And certainly with that may come some cost savings in the form of whether it's space, facility use, or otherwise. It's definitely worth pursuing in my mind, because typically, even in the town office, we may be open like we are with 30 committees a month meeting in here. And the idea that you don't have to come downtown to meet, it really, really cuts back on your costs. And this is a very efficient platform. So these are things that we're thinking about and I think make perfect sense to continue on even after COVID-19 goes away, which it hopefully will soon. But just wanted to put that out there and add it to the COVID-19 update, sort of the next stages.
Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes, I had approached Mr. Dean actually about the right to know aspect of this idea. I agree with him that these meetings are much easier, and actually we've had more participants from the public in these meetings than we typically do when we're sitting in a Novak room. And maybe that's because they don't have to drive downtown and they can still, that's something we've always had a problem with attracting younger people to our committees is because they have a commitment to their children and they can't always get babysitting or whatnot. But so this makes it a little more flexible, and that's why I'd like to see it continue. My problem, and this is where we need to follow up on the right to know aspects of it, is that I brought it up at a previous meeting that, the HDC had a project that involves looking at physical drawings. And those are only available to people right now if they call the planning department or building department or go to the building department to get a set of the plans. And I just thought we need to be consistent for one thing, because all of our other land use boards post their packets as the select board does. And so having that one group hang out there is bad. I think it looks bad. I also think we look undertreated, but that's an aside. But it's something to consider. It's not a trade-off, but I think there is going to be a change in some activity with the administration of these different meetings, that we're going to increase the participation from IT and maybe increase the administrative aspect as far as documentation made public goes. But I think those details are things that we can work on. And we also are having a question asked at the state level about remote meetings. And somebody is writing and has put in an LSR about this, a bill request. So we can do it. We can wait. I think it's a great idea.
And for regional meetings, it's modified. I can't even tell you how much it's modified just traveling within the region and reducing or eliminating the need to do that. So you're freeing up time. You're also freeing up resources, because I gave the example of the NEPR meeting, which is the Downeaster group. Typically that would take 3/4 of a day to participate in. You'd have to go get on a train and go, 4 or 5 stops up into Maine, get off, go someplace. And now you can log on with a minute to spare. You can put things on in the background if you're not on the agenda, and you're done when you're done, which is an hour and a half later. So it's not great for people who love to go eat lunch as part of these meetings, but I can tell you that from an efficiency standpoint, it's an incredibly efficient way to do business. So hopefully we can get something done on that front, because I think it has huge potential and huge value. And so we all are, this pandemic is obviously a really difficult situation, but one of the things that has come out of it, I think, in that regard, the positive regard, is this process has really, really been illuminated as far as what we can do remotely. So anyway, just wanted to have that conversation with all of you. More to come.
Thank you. And those are all very, very good points. But I think, Selectwoman Gilman, you said it best. We just need to make sure that we're consistent in whatever we do for all of our committees and all of our meetings. We have to stay consistent. And, Mr. Dean, the only downfall, other than, human interaction every once in a while is healthy. The only downfall I think of, we had an incident, I believe it was last week, when the whole town sort of crashed. Internet, the schools crashed. I know I was working, and I think that the more and more people are staying home, kids are staying home, everybody's using the internet at the same time. Selectman Brown, you and I were involved in a meeting last week with Mr. Dean, and that Zoom meeting came to an end rather abruptly because several of us crashed. So, I think we need to look forward and put protocols in place if that were to happen.
And right now, if we were to crash as we're sitting here, the meeting would just end.
Well, that's what I was thinking last week. Yeah. when we ended that meeting, that Selectman Brown was with me. That's what was going through my head, is what if the power goes out here and the meeting ends. I mean, that's one thing we really need to look at.
Yeah.
Even now during the pandemic, because I think that's going to happen more and more as people are, everybody's online at the same time and everybody's online working. So, I mean, I'm not a technological person, but I would think that we would expect more of that.
Yeah, and we have those discussions, as you know, when a single board member is missing, do you want to have the meeting or not? Or two of you are missing, do you want to have the meeting or not? So in a virtual sense, you'd probably just adopt a rule if you got somehow off the system and you couldn't get back, that you need a rule to say, okay, we would adjourn and come back, which is somewhat similar to how you do it in person if people can't make it or they had to leave sick or something like that. So there are some similarities there.
Well, interesting thought. More to come. Anybody else on the board wish to comment or have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dean. We can move on now to regular business. We do not have any tax abatements, credits, or exemptions, but we have a couple of permits. Parks and Rec, I'll let you go first. Mr. Beeson?
Sorry, I don't have the packet right in front of me. Reference to the road race?
Yes.
We were approached by the Exeter Runners Club about hosting a road race, and we wanted to get the pulse of the board if they felt comfortable in permitting road races. They are allowable under the state guidelines, but we wanted to throw it out there first to you.
Is there a proposed route?
No, not at this time. It was just they wanted to touch base first before they applied.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf?
I'm going to assume, is this for the Thanks for Giving 5K, 10K race?
That's correct, Lovey.
Right. So assuming that they have similar route that they used before leaving from SST, I think the only thing that we would have to really consider if we approve it is the numbers, since they didn't have I think the restriction on numbers prior was in the 1,000 to 2,000 range. It was up there. They, by the last race, they had quite a few numbers. So I think the biggest thing to consider is just numbers and staggering start times and figuring out where to corral people while they wait to kick off the start of the race. So if that's something that you guys think that you can manage and sort of help guide them with, then I'm for it. Lord knows what else is everyone going to be doing on Thanksgiving in isolation, traveling around. So I mean, I'm more for allow for things to happen with guidance rather than cut them out completely. So if you have an idea, I would love to sort of put that on you guys to come up with something creative where they could get that off the ground.
Yeah, Melissa's been in contact with them, so we definitely could reach out to them because they did have a plan, I believe, but they wanted to first get a feeling from the board.
No, thank you. And I think that we've asked that of all applicants, if they can put together what their plan is, the numbers. Selectwoman Roundtree have made a great suggestion, staggering the start times. Mr. Murray, do you have anything to add?
Just to reiterate that there is state guidance for this, so as long as their plans would fall in line with state guidance,
okay,
it could be doable.
Mr. Dean?
Yeah, just a simple comment to say the thing, and this is not to put a damper on any 5Ks. I know a lot of them are being done virtually right now, and I'm not sure how the participation has changed. Maybe it's even better if they do them virtually. I don't know. No, Lovey's shaking her head, and I can tell you've run a few 5Ks. So I just wanted to make sure the board understood that there's a lot of 5Ks in this town. It's a popular thing. So it's not to put a damper on it. It's just to say, my suggestion is whatever we implement, make sure we can appropriately police it and really make sure that it's safe, because it's such a popular activity. So that was my my ad.
Okay. Is the board comfortable with having Mr. Bisson reach out to the organizers to put together a plan for our review?
Yes.
Okay.
And full disclosure, I've participated in planning and also emceeing this event multiple times over, so I'm familiar with how detail oriented the group is and how well they work with the police department and previously the YMCA and also SST. So I think working with you, I have a good feeling that this can go off quite well and be beneficial and also safe for the town. And it's always really cold. So hurrah for those of you who want to venture out on Thanksgiving morning to do that. So I think it would be fun.
Great, thank you. Selectman Brown, do you have any objections?
I do not.
Okay, and Selectwoman Cowan?
Just looking forward to seeing the plan.
Okay, great. Mr. Bisson, if you could get that for us, we'll look forward to reviewing that with you.
No problem. Melissa can reach out to him tomorrow.
Fantastic, thank you. We had a late permit request added to our packet as an addendum this afternoon, and I believe Kristen Murphy's here to speak to that.
I am.
Hi, Kristen.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to submit this, and I do apologize for it being late. The Conservation Commission is very interested in increasing use at Rains Farm and has been working to build up kind of a strong community support network for the property. And so over the years, we've tried to host several events there. And weather often gets in our way, but some of the more popular events have been Full Moon Snowshoe, for example. We've had quite a few attendees. We had planned for a spring Sky Watch event out there where we would have a presentation in the barn, and then we'd move into the field with telescopes. And so things have changed, and we work to kind of morph that design. So what the Conservation Commission is looking for your support on is hosting an event at Rains Barn. The commission would partner with New Hampshire Astronomical Society. They would come, they would present, what types of planets, what types of stars are visible. Attendees would spread out in the field. We would require all attendees to be masked, and we would have attendees required registration. So, and for people to keep their distance in the field, but no telescopes would be used. It would just be kind of a naked eye viewing of the stars. And so they are requesting your support for hosting this event Friday, October 16th from 7:30 to 9:30. And because it is such a short duration event, they weren't anticipating providing porta potties on site, and no food or drinks or anything of that nature would be there.
And how many people would be allowed to this event?
Yeah, good question. So we had talked about capping the tickets at 100. I don't anticipate us getting up that high, but the field would certainly accommodate space for that and more, but we want to keep it so that people could hear the presentation. So
a maximum 100.
Yep.
Mask requirement, would there be any markings to allow people to know whether they were safely social distancing?
So we did talk about that. The challenge is not knowing how many how many people are in a family group, because we would anticipate this to be a family attended event. So how big a size space would you allocate for people? And so our thought was we just request people to bring blankets and chairs and set up, and then we would be present to, ask people to separate further if we weren't seeing what we anticipated as a need for distance.
Okay, and Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf has her hand up.
Just similar to the race that we just discussed, my biggest question is people checking in and the crowd sort of maintenance of, if you have 100 people in theory,
right,
it's unlikely, but if you had 100 people showing up and they're all supposed to show up for a 7, 8 o'clock event, then how do you manage the clustering of people at one entryway? So that's the only thing that I would consider is something to think about in terms of how you get waves of people in a safe numbers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, we do anticipate several volunteers from the Conservation Commission helping out, so we could have multiple check-in stations. So I think we could accommodate it that way.
Kristen, 2 more questions. Have you reviewed this with Mr. Murray? And also, how will this be advertised, or is it being advertised?
So we had left, I was really challenged with Facebook events. They incorporated Eventbrite ticketing, and I can't figure out how to cancel the old tickets. So it's been up there since the spring. We have had recent ticket purchases. I think like 30 tickets were bought in the past couple weeks. So that's generally how we would advertise most of our events, is through the Conservation Commission's Facebook page. And we do put them under the town website under the news tab if there's space for the events. And then the Conservation Commission's portion of the website does have upcoming activities and events.
I see. Okay.
Oh, and James Murray and I have not talked about it. I did mention it to him. It was just this morning. So I would welcome your thoughts on this, James.
So I did receive the email. I think it sounds pretty straightforward. You're having groups of people separated, wearing masks. It's outdoors. It's a limited event. You'll have registration and tickets. So I think as long as those guidelines are followed, especially with the mask mandate in place, it can be done safely.
Great, thank you.
Is there any indoor use of the barn or no?
No, we would not consider opening the barn at this stage. It'll just be strictly in the field.
And you said you have several volunteers lined up?
We do, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? Selectwoman Gilman?
I just had a question. I know in the past, there have been a few shared telescopes. So it wouldn't be prohibited to bring your own anyway, as long as you don't share it.
Yeah, and binoculars even are often used for this sort of thing. If not everyone has a telescope, you could bring your own set of binoculars.
Okay, thanks.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
So then, just in terms of timing, the event is taking place the 16th. Is that? And we don't meet again until when? After that?
The 19th, right.
So then how do we do this?
Well, the board would have to make a decision this evening.
Without the paperwork going through.
That's my thought, yeah.
Interestingly, Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf, as a municipality, we don't have to obey our own laws. So, and this being a town committee, I have no problem with it going forward. I felt like this was more informative to us than asking permission, but I appreciate the overview and giving us the opportunity to have the input like yours. You're concerned about the circulation of when people are coming in and out. But I feel comfortable in just saying, yes, go ahead. I'm not sure this even needs a vote, does it? Would you prefer?
Right, so that's what I want to be certain of. So just school me in, because this is different than if they were using Swayze Parkway or some other town. So this is like, hypothetically speaking, the Word Barn, where there's a private event taking place and they're sort of informing.
In this case, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen, but doesn't the Conservation Commission actually own that property? for the
town does own. The town does own the property, and so that's part of the reason why the request came late. I was a little unclear of the approval process myself. So yeah, look forward to the outcome of this discussion.
So this technically wouldn't be a permanent event through Parks and Rec. This is a town committee looking to hold an event on town property that the committee actually kind of oversees, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
One option, Mr. Chairman, is you could have a map drawn of this and look at the route and get some of the details that have been laid out in a bullet point format. And if you consider that kind of a draft of what you're discussing tonight, and we could circulate that around. And if anybody objects to it, we do have time between now and the event time to schedule a quick special meeting to discuss any issues that you might have with it before making any final decision if you want to go that route. So.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's probably a better idea, because we had started actually permitting in-house kind of meetings. So let's be consistent.
I'd like to stay consistent
about that.
Okay, I agree. I think if we can just schedule ahead of time the special meeting, put it on the calendar prior to this event taking place, and then that way Kristen can have time to go over the necessary information with James, get it all signed off on, and then we can go forward. Because I just don't want there to be any inequities when it comes down the line if somebody else is, coming on board asking for something similar.
But would we technically be giving a permit approval to a committee?
This is a town-sponsored event.
But the way we're talking about it right now, in theory, what we'd be giving if we went through an approval process, we would be granting an approved permit to a committee. Am I hearing that right or no?
Yeah, can I answer that? Before the pandemic came at us, and we passed the permitting process off onto the Parks and Rec Department. At that time, we started requesting departments or committees that were holding an event to get a permit, as does every other entity in town. So this is just something that some groups didn't get used to. I know, some boards aren't used to having to apply to use the town hall if it were open. And this is an extension of that. And like Kristen said, the process is still kind of fuzzy because now we have the pandemic to add into it. So this would be appropriate to have a short meeting about it.
Okay, thanks.
Purely because of the pandemic. I mean, normally we wouldn't even be hearing this.
Right.
Kristen, how soon could you put together just a quick plan for James, Mr. Murray to look at?
I can get that to him tomorrow.
Okay. And then we could review it.
So James, you're just looking for a map of the property and like the kind of the specs that I mentioned, but written out.
Yes, and I'll work with Greg on seeing what else we need for consistency's sake with our applications. And we'll work together tomorrow on what we're looking for.
Is parking going to be an issue, Kristen, with that many people?
No, so actually we have done, with support from Public Works, quite a bit of improvement to the parking opportunities out there. A lot of brush was cut back along the stone wall that parallels Newfields Road. So there is parking, head-in parking from the parking lot on Newfields Road all the way up to the barn.
Because my take is on mask enforcement. That's going to be one of your key spots. I see that when we deal with sports going over to Seacoast United and Epping, it's a lot of cars there. And so masking up is very important as you're getting out of your car and walking to wherever you're going. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you.
So reaching out to the rest of the board, I mean, I don't foresee this meeting taking more than 5 or 10 minutes. Would Thursday or Friday be reasonable for your schedules?
Yes.
Thursday busy, Friday works.
Friday works.
It's sad to say.
Selectwoman Cowan?
Friday, it looks like either mid-afternoon is my only availability. Like between 3 and 30. Unless we do an evening meeting, which I don't imagine anybody does.
Selectman Brown, circling back to you, does Friday at 3 o'clock work?
It does, yep.
Selectwoman Gilman?
Yes.
Okay, and Selectwoman Roundtree, just to confirm, 3 o'clock would be okay?
Yeah, that works for me. And also, if Thursday morning worked for folks, it's just the evening does not work for me on Thursday. That was the...
Yeah, no, I was thinking daytime. I mean, because again, I don't see this taking more than 10 minutes.
Okay. So I could also do Thursday if we want to make sure that they have ample time to start getting preparation and
yeah, that's fair. Back to Selectwoman Cowan. Do you have any time Thursday during the day? No. Okay.
I can move something if it's going to.
Kristen, would Friday at 3 give you enough time?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That works for everybody. So, Mr. Dean, if we could post that with an agenda.
Thursday at which
Friday?
time again? Oh, Friday.
Yeah, Friday at 3.
Friday at 3. Friday at 3 o'clock. Okay. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Thompson is still with us and his hand's up, just to let you know.
Mr. Thompson, you have your hand up for a public comment?
Yes, it's just a point of inquiry. Darius Thompson, 15 Drinkwater Road. If you're going through a permitting process, then we have one established. Shouldn't it be followed whether we have a pandemic or not? That you should, for a committee on the parade committee, we always had to submit a permit and follow that process. You submit the application and make sure the plan's checked off and done. And the approval process could be done without a meeting. But given the nature of the pandemic and all, I understand we may have to have a special meeting. My only question are twofold. One, glad that you're following that process. But two, do you have ample enough time for public notice of this meeting? The special meeting Friday.
Yeah, the answer to your question number 2 is yes.
Okay.
And back to your first question, if I understood it correctly, the select board a year ago, and I'll give you the real Cliff Note version, delegated permitting to the Parks and Rec Department. The select board twice for a closed period of time this year has voted to take back the permitting due to the pandemic. And the reason that we're doing it this way with this proposal of Ms. Murphy is to make sure that we are being consistent with all applicants as we have been.
Understood. I appreciate that. And most importantly, Kristen, you guys do a wonderful job on the Conservation Committee. I love the Range Farm property, and I'm glad DPW has worked with you to help clear out some of the brush to allow for more parking to enjoy a wonderful town-owned space, and hopefully keep it that way. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Kristen, we'll look forward to getting that, and then we will convene Friday at 3, and Mr. Dean, you'll make sure that's posted with an agenda?
We will.
Great. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you to the rest of the board for being flexible. Okay, next we have Mr. Bisson back with a Gale Park renovation proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, our Park Improvement Fund has helped set up to fund these type of projects. And Julie, this one is dear to your heart. So we put an RFP out this August for renovations of the walkway. And in your packet, you will see a picture of what the current condition of the walkway is. It's kind of overgrown now. So we are looking to do a renovation of it, dig it out, put the proper materials in it that needs to allow for drainage, and put a stabilized stone dust in that has a organic polymer in it that will bind things and make it as stable as almost as hard as concrete, but give the look of stone dust. Examples of this type of material used is Concord, Massachusetts, around a lot of their Revolutionary War era paths, as well as Harvard University. Daryl is actually also doing it. So it's a very simple process. They come, they'll dig out 6 inches, they'll put it down, and a gravel base, and then the polymer, the stabilized stone dust. This will be edged with cobblestone on either side to give it a clean edge. 3 people have submitted a bid for this, and Bayberry is the one that I am recommending. And sorry, I'm just pulling up. And Bayberry is based out of Hampton, and they have done and used this material quite a bit. And yes, thank you, Russ. So I am recommending Bayberry and Company for $27,367.94. I will have to come back additionally for police detail, not knowing how long this process will take. We will need a police detail at least on Linden Street as we do the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bison. Any questions from the board?
I would just, since Mr. Bison mentioned me, I just want to say that I really appreciate processing going down this road for these stone dust material. Originally, Mr. Bison had proposed bricks, but that park, I don't believe ever had a brick pathway, and the stone dust is much more appropriate to the period of its design. So I appreciate the looking into the change of material. Otherwise, I have no problem.
Thank you. And it actually reduced the cost quite a bit, Julie. As you know, if we had done granite pavers the whole way, it would have cost a lot more money.
Yep.
Mr. Dean, could you bring us back to the... Thank you.
We're back.
Any other questions? And if not, I would entertain a motion to award the Gale Park pathway renovation to Bayberry and Company, Hampton, New Hampshire, for the sum of $27,367.94 from the Parks Improvement Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
The other Crimson says aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
And the clerk says aye. Mr. Chair?
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Beeson. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, that does it for permits and approvals. Mr. Dean, you're up for the town manager's report.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to mention, and I'm going to just pause a second here so I can dig it out. I wanted to talk about a recent incident that occurred on Washington Street because it crossed my mind when we were interviewing the police stakeholders committee candidates tonight. And I just wanted to mention it because I feel very strongly that we should mention this and make sure the rest of the board members know about this. We were out, one of our new officers, who happens to be a female officer, was out on Washington Street doing patrol of speeding. And I got a note from the chief addressed to a woman out on Washington Street, and I'll just read it here. Hello, Mrs. Angeloni. I want to update you on the speeding complaints on Washington Street. We stepped up our directed patrols of the street to monitor your concern. I am saddened to report that several of your neighbors confronted one of our female officers and berated her with profanities and the middle finger. They said they did not want her on their street and claimed that her presence made it look like a high crime area. This happened 2 days in a row. Please note, we will continue to monitor the speeding. However, an officer will not be stationary and subject to the abuse. I was appalled to get that email, and I wanted to relay it to the board so you all knew about it and the public knew about it as well. I think we've been talking a lot about fair treatment of people in our community, and it appalls me that one of our new officers, who literally just got on the street a week earlier, was subjected to that kind of abuse. And I'm disgusted by it, and I want to condemn it publicly. And I just can't say, words can't equate to how I'm feeling about it. So I wanted to mention it tonight. Thank you for the chance to mention it.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Any members of the board wish to comment?
I have to agree with you, Russ. That's really disappointing. It's beyond disappointing. It's embarrassing and beyond disrespectful. I don't understand why they would respond that way, but I truly hope it's not the intention to completely avoid that neighborhood, because if that's how they're responding to a police officer, it worries me how they would respond to somebody who does not live in that neighborhood, who they find to be some form of an outsider. So, yeah, I'm going to put it out there that that's completely uncalled for, and I hope that it's a small number of people rather than a larger group.
It just struck me that I listened to what Mr. King had to say tonight, and that resonated with me, and to have to see that come out of the chief's office, whom I know is a very large supporter of having female officers in our department. It's just appalling to me. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So we have, the rest of my report is we have a new part-time administrative assistant in the fire department. Her name is Jenna Gosselin. She replaced Amanda, who left us earlier this year when COVID hit. So we're happy to have her on board. She's young and energetic and looks like she has a great skill set. So she'll be helping the fire department. One of her many things that she'll be doing for the fire department is helping them update their website. So if you have any comments or questions or suggestions on the fire department website, she's our new go-to person for that. I was able to attend the Park Street Memorial Tree celebration last week with the chairman. It was a very, very nice event organized by Eileen Flockhart to recognize the 3 families that were involved that are having trees planted in their name at Park Street Common. So for the public who might be interested in that, you can go over and see the trees. The virtual trees, so to speak, are in the ground. So you can actually go and read about the people that they're dedicated to. So it's just a very nice ceremony, well covered by Seacoast Online, and just a really nice event, nice remembrance. The chair mentioned late last week, we had our first meeting on the cable TV contract. If you remember, we got tasked with getting that done, and it was actually a very good and productive meeting until Comcast work on Hampton Road knocked us out about an hour in, but we got most of it done. Oh, the irony. And
I wasn't going to bring that
up. So if things continue to progress on that front, I think we'll have some results for you soon. I don't think it'll take too long. We decided that we would go back to Comcast with a few things that we were asking of them in terms of an HD channel and some other things that we talked about. So, but overall, a good meeting. We also received an email about election observers today. There was a concern raised by Ginny Robb about that, and an explanation about what election observers are. And actually, Town Moderator Scafidi came into the town office on Friday for a quick meeting with myself and Chief Poulin and Deputy Chief Monk, Bruce Page, about the upcoming election and just what are the rules on election observers. He actually already responded to Ms. Robb, but we'll send that along to the board as well, so you have it and have an understanding of what Mr. Scafidi's position is on that. And then the last thing I had was just a report that the budget subcommittee meeting started today. We did meet with Nancy Belanger, Anna Grazier, and Kaylee Bryden in the Novak room this morning. Very socially distanced, very masked up. Again, limited number of people in the room, so we were able to accomplish that. And the meeting went well. So they're going to meet again tomorrow with the rest of the general government group and begin writing their report. So lots of good questions and discussion today about the budget items. And that was it, unless there are any questions from me.
Any questions of Mr. Dean? Thanks, Russ. And I too want to thank the Flockharts and the neighbors of the Park Street Common area. It was for inviting us. It was a very moving ceremony, and the families all had representatives there, and they were certainly very moved. So, and the trees are going to look great next spring when they're planted. So, thank you again to the Flockharts. Select Board Committee reports. We'll start with Selectwoman Rountree-Olive.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Selectman Brown?
I have nothing to report, but I'll be bringing the concerns today to the Communications Committee meeting tomorrow.
Thank you. Selectwoman Gilman?
Sorry, my pad froze. I have nothing in the past, but I'll tell you this next week is full. I'm having a Heritage Commission meeting, Historic District Commission meeting, an Energy Commission meeting, and a Conservation Commission meeting. So watch for me on TV.
Okay. Selectwoman Cowan.
Yes, there was a planning board meeting. It feels like we're back to making good progress. I'm really glad we have appointed Dator as our alternate, and that is happening this week as well. And then the other thing that we had was a very good catch up on the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, where as a committee we were able to brainstorm some potential winter activities that include things like hiking outside, cross-country skiing, learning how to be in the wilderness, and then maybe some bowling potential partnerships with folks. And I would like to take this time to thank our Parks and Rec staff for the incredible pivot to a socially distanced but still fun child care camp. That was not like the normal camp, but was fun nonetheless. And they had our kids safe and busy and sane. And then we did discuss also, we will be sending out a survey to find out what people's plans are for next summer, because the planning has already started for that.
Great. Thank you. I know Greg and Melissa have dropped off, but they have done a remarkable job given the challenges of the pandemic. So thank you for citing that. I did not have any meetings of sustainability tomorrow night. However, I did participate in or rather listened in on the first VRC meeting. Mr. Dean, you did a great job going through the budget and the narrative. And we'll be looking forward to October 16th for the all-day fun general government VRC meeting.
And we talked about that just today, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the Zoom and where the departments will be located. But I think the best thing for us to do is probably have people at the workspace, if they can, at their desks, meaning to Zoom in to the meeting.
Yep. That sounds reasonable. Okay, correspondence. Mr. Dean, I guess the Health Trust Board rather, is having a hearing on proposed bylaws. We are obviously a member of the Health Trust, and I know you sit on the board. Do you want to briefly go through this?
Yeah, I think the one of the big discussion items that we'll have tomorrow, and there's a public hearing about it, is there are two things. One is the text proposed amendment number 1, which has to do with actually having our annual meeting be virtualized. We have to make a change to the bylaws in order to have that happen. So we've been working on that diligently for the last few months. And so that will be on the agenda tomorrow for review by the full board and a vote. And then there's also term limits to be discussed right now. The Health Trust has 3 consecutive 3-year terms for their positions, and then you have to depart via term limit situation, and there's a change to 5 consecutive 3-year terms, so we'll see how that goes. That should get a lot of discussion. And then there is also an amendment about withdrawing. So when you withdraw from the Health Trust, there was just some cleanup of some language there of how that process is done and what you need to do. And what the liabilities are of the member before you withdraw, if you withdraw, and also the giving the authority to the executive director to pursue any member community that is 60 days in arrears with paying their bills. So those are all the bylaw changes that we're anticipating holding a public hearing on tomorrow morning, and that will be held virtually as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Keep us posted, please.
Will do.
We also heard from Xfinity regarding regional sports networks with a lot of sports being canceled early in the year. They're looking for refunding if they can. You can find that in the packet. Mr. Dean, you and I discussed the letter that was sent to me regarding the Rockingham County FEMA when I met with you in your office last week, and we have until the end of January to respond to this, correct?
Right, January 29th, 2021. So the adoption needs to happen actually not later than 2 weeks before that date. So we'll tee that up for probably late November, early December.
Great, thank you. We had an ethics question from a resident, and it looks like you responded timely. Mr. Dean, have you heard anything further on that?
No, I have not at this point.
Okay, and then the last was funding available. We talked about that during the COVID-19. So that was all of our correspondence. Reviewing the board calendar. Again, we've agreed to meet again on October 19th, October 26th because of the election, November 9th, and November 23rd. With us having only 2 meetings before the election, Mr. Dean, I'd like to bring in Mr. Scafidi and Vicky for the next 2 meetings just to kind of go over what's changed since the September 8th election. I know Vicky reached out to me today and they've got some changes they want to announce. Additionally, I reached out to Tanisha Johnson the day after our last meeting, and I'm happy to say that she has agreed to come before us on the October 19th meeting. So we'll have Tanisha on the agenda. And I think that's it, unless there are any other questions or comments from the board before we adjourn. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second, Madam Clerk.
Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf.
Aye.
Selectwoman Cowan.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
Clerk says aye. Mr. Chair.
Aye. We meet again Friday at 3. This meeting's adjourned. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.